Hello and welcome to Vendor Trash. Is the title a reference to my opinions, my drawing skills, or both? That's for you to decide. New playable races. It's something that WoW players have obsessively talked about since pretty much the dawn of the game. I mean, maybe not in the first few months of vanilla, but it wouldn't surprise me either. But pretty much every expansion has brought with it speculation about what we could be getting to play next. Many, like Goblins and Pandaren, eventually made their way into the game properly, but some popular nominations never did. Things like Ogres and Naga. And for the most part, I could understand the hype surrounding these suggestions, but one always seemed kind of stupid to me. Ethereals. I'm not saying that I didn't enjoy the role that Ethereals played in the game. They were a cool alien race for us to interact with in Outland, but cool enough to warrant being a playable race? Surely you jest. For starters, what would we even have for customization options? The things don't even have faces. The bandages are neat, but how much variety can you actually squeeze out of them? All Ethereals are going to look the same. Their run animation is too out there, it'd never work. And at the end of the day, they're just space mummies, aren't they? Space mummies that are a bit fixated on commerce. Granted, I think most of those criticisms from myself and others are actually fairly valid, but I have to admit that I was being a bit reductionist. Even back in the Burning Crusade, there was a lot more going on with them. They already had the background of their home planet of Koresh being destroyed by the Void Lord Dimensius. Now, obviously, we didn't know the weight Void Lords carried back then, and a lot of their story would be recontextualized later, but it was something. Furthermore, they had the ecodomes which they used to allow life to flourish in otherwise hostile environments. I guess despite them occupying these domes, I didn't necessarily connect the dots here. Why would these energy beings be at all concerned with maintaining natural environments? Well, maybe it's because they know how much having a desolate, destroyed planet sucks. Still, these points all ultimately just made for a good starting point. It would require considerable expounding upon to make them worthy of being playable. But we got nothing for like a really long time. Pretty much all we saw of them after TBC was them being used for transmog, void storage, reforging, and the like, because they're spacey and exotic. We got a little bit with the 7.3 Argus patch with the Shadow Guard snooping around Eridath, and Ilaria and her new teacher, Locust Walker, working to stop them. It was interesting, I suppose, but it felt more like they were introduced as context for Ilaria learning to harness the void than for their own sake. I mean, Locust Walker feels like the kind of name you come up with for your first fanfic, not an actual name. Nor did he have that much depth as a character. And then Shadowlands came around and introduced us to the Brokers. The general response that I saw in the community, and one that I shared, was that they were cool, but ultimately just a less exciting knockoff of Ethereals. Commerce-oriented travelers of the cosmos who seemed to lack organic bodies and merely inhabited suits of some sort. And based on the complete lack of any hints at an actual connection, I do not believe that the writers at the time intended for them to be Koreshi. Like, there would have been something, right? Well, skip forward a bit to the Harbinger quests meant to tee up the War Within, and we have Locust Walker explaining to Ilaria that the Radiant Song was heard on Koresh as well, and foreshadowed the planet's destruction. Okay, now things are getting slightly interesting. And then we received the lore-walking quests preceding patch 11.2, and suddenly that connection between Ethereals and Brokers was made. They were both Koreshi. With that one simple change, Ethereals gained so much. Suddenly they had lore from more than one expansion. Suddenly they had architecture and a wider cast of characters that were relevant to them. Venari's inclusion alone does so much for them. Heck, by extension, this means all of the enlightened brokers from Zereth Mortis count as Koreshi lore as well. It was admittedly a very simple maneuver on Blizzard's part, but I cannot underscore strongly enough how elegant of a move it actually was. You took two kind of cool but redundant races and combined them in a way that both removed that redundancy and which enriched both of their histories and cultures. Okay, Blizz, you have my attention. And then we get the Doom of Koresh, an audio drama following Locust Walker way back when the planet's destruction was imminent. And of all the audio dramas and short stories released for The War Within, this one easily took the cake. We found out about Locust Walker's dark realization as a technomancer that Dimensius was coming, his relationship with the nomadic Chryson, his home city of Tazavesh, his induction into the secret ravel that aimed to save Koresh, the arcane barriers he constructed that would allow his people to endure Dementius's presence, the wasting that afflicted his people as a result, and the binding they utilized as a means of surviving that. We learned of his friendships with Venari and Kaiveza. We learned of Salhadar's betrayal. We learn more of the Koreshi's culture, how their oaths are of paramount importance to them, and how being an oathbreaker is the worst label they can receive. This is later comically mused on by broker NPCs who claim that a deal is just another kind of oath. And of course, we learn about who Locust Walker is as a person. He's almost a Byronic hero. Not quite, but almost, as he is a brilliant mind cursed with terrible knowledge that not everyone has to endure, and a willingness to make the hard choices that are often necessary for the greater good, which includes putting down the Void Revenant that millennia ago had once been his lover. And that Locust Walker was a title the Rabble gave him because, yeah, that'd be a really weird name for his parents to give him. Okay, Blizz, now you're cooking. Once we're into 11.2 itself, things get even better. I mean, we don't get the Nexus camels from Hearthstone, which is an outright crime, but whatever. Tazavesh has returned to Koresh. The time has come for Locust Walker to prevent Dementius's reawakening, and for Venari to use the fortunes she amassed in the Shadowlands to buy and operate the ecodomes necessary for the planet's wildlife to be restored. We see more of the Koreshi people and their oaths. We encounter cultists loyal to Xalatath, and the Wastelanders led by Soulscribe. We learn that it wasn't Dementius that actually blew up the planet, but the Rabble, which had realized there was no other way to keep the Void Lord from devouring the planet, and figured they may as well deny him his prize, theoretically killing him in the process. Now there's some moral grayness. It was a decision which earns Alaria's distrust and disrespect, which actually makes me like Locust Walker even more. Like, he lied to her and was afraid of her reaction, but you can't really blame him because, well, what good did her knowing the truth actually do for anyone? A nuanced character, yay! We see Dementius's defeat, Locust Walker's death at Xalatath's hands, and the recovery of Wait, Locust Walker's dead? Well, that certainly doesn't bode well for playable Ethereals. Who's gonna lead them now? We had the datamined enchanting glamour. We had female models for them finally. They have to happen, right? Okay, well, Venari's still around and kind of leading things. She may be a broker, but Blizz hasn't been shying away from racial leaders not being one-to-one with their race lately. Or heck, maybe Kaiveza could step up. I don't know. But okay, let's not dwell too much on Locust Walker. Alaria certainly didn't. She even kind of emphasized that he should have listened to her after he died. Ouch. But you know, he was actually an interesting character now, so of course Blizz was going to kill him off. Koresh's world soul, feeble and diminished as it is, has been recovered, and we sort of restore it to the planet at the end of Ecodome Aldani. That's pretty cool, actually. The last time we met a world soul other than Azeroth's, we killed him right away, so this was a nice change of pace. At this point, it's not like I actually believed we were getting Ethereals. I'm not that blindly hopeful, but it didn't feel outside the realm of possibility. After all, they'd still fit into Midnight, especially with Salhadar returning as a boss in the Voidspire raid. Perhaps his final defeat would serve as the gateway for them being playable, but nothing actually got announced. In fact, we got playable Haranir announced instead, and as much as I enjoy a curveball surprise major feature, I can't imagine Blizz thinking it'd be a good idea to not announce such a highly requested playable race if they were actually going to do it. So, sadly, unfortunately, I have no expectation that we'll be getting them in Midnight. And with the Ethereal patch moving into the rearview mirror, it seems exceedingly unlikely that we ever will. Talk about a roller coaster. I'm not that upset, but I did find the whole experience to be an exceptionally Blizzard thing to do. Take something that I'm initially quite indifferent toward, finally give it the love and attention to develop into something that I can be quite hyped about, and then don't actually give it to us. How many times must I learn this lesson? Ah well. And they really did get me excited for our space mummies. They'd finally been built into a race with enough lore to really warrant being playable, which is honestly more than you can say for most of the races we've gotten after Pandaren. They even, probably accidentally, had their own city that could have been refitted to have actual capital functionality. They had all sorts of Arabic influences, which we don't really have in other playable races. We even had Egyptian voice actress Aisha Salim voicing Venari. I could have finally roleplayed as Nefertina from Mummies Alive. Alas, seems 'twas not meant to be. Just, Blizz, please, if you're not going to give us something awesome in the future, Please don't make it so enticing and so feasible. I'm a foolish person, and I need to be protected from my own hopes and desires. Anyway, that's the video. I don't know if I had much of a point to make, but Blizzard made me feel stuff, and that's reason enough to make a video about it. For this week's drawing, I went with Locust Walker, who, despite presumably now being dead, is still the Ethereal we by far have spent the most time with. As you may have surmised from my earlier comments, I didn't really care about him in Legion, he was kind of boring, but the War Within made him a super interesting character to me. I mean, nowadays, pretty much all you have to do is give a character flaws, and I am hooked. But they actually went further than that. They got me invested in him. They made me agree with the morally questionable things that he did. That's a sign of a greatly written character. But like I said earlier, he was too interesting, so obviously Blizzard had to write him off. Rest in peace, my good fellow. Rest in peace. And I set him in Koresh as that just seemed the most fitting. It is his homeworld. Specifically, I found a spot out on that PvP island, Vanquisher's Wake, and I don't actually know how that place works. I assume if you're in war mode, there's a world quest that pops up or something. But it did give me a good shot at the black hole void swirl thing at the heart of Koresh. And I must say that I really dig Koresh as a zone. It gives off total Outland vibes. I mean, obviously the presence of Ethereals and the Ego Domes and the Mana Forges, but also how it's just this barren, vacuous outer space zone. There's a certain mystical, ethereal, pun intended, beauty to the place. Kind of like Honeyloon Ridge in Super Mario Odyssey. That's one of my favorite levels in the game just because it's so quiet and beautiful. Anyway, that's all I had for this video, so thank you for watching, and I will catch you next week. Bye-bye.